Representative Curtis.
And you had one other addition, and I missed it, to the plan. You had the $2 million going to the state water plan, and then there was another one of $1 million, I think, to somewhere else that we've added.
Madam Chair, the addition is the Sheltered Workshop Transition Fund within the Department of Labor.
Any other questions about EDIF? So how did it come to be back in 1986, and maybe you can't answer this since we're talking specifically about EDIF, that on the blue sheet, the initial transfers from 86 went into county reappraisal and split between juvenile detention facilities and the correctional institutions building fund? And then EDIF.
Madam Chair, I would have to do some digging to see if I can find any information on that.
Okay, well, like I said, it's an original, pass out of funds to those three, and I'm sure there had to be some kind of legislation that picked those three funds to receive state gaming revenue monies. So I just thought I'd ask. Anything else? Seeing none, thank you, Charday. Appreciate it. Did you want to go over the commerce and just breeze through what happened in here and what happened in approps?
Yes, I can do that. The House Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources budget changes are on page 4 for fiscal year 2026. Let's see. There were no adjustments made in House appropriations to fiscal year 2025, so just so you all are aware. So for fiscal year 2026, I'll try to show both of these at the same time. Item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Items 1 through 11 were kept in by House Committee on Appropriations. Item 12 was deleted, the EDIF funds in exchange for federal funds. Item 13 was deleted. Item 14 was deleted. Item 16 was deleted. Items 19 through 28 were deleted. And those are reflected on page 5. And on the green sheet, fiscal year 2025 is on one side and fiscal year 2026 is on the other side. So if you want to see what the committee recommendation, the House Appropriations recommendation is as it stands now, you can see that on the green table.
So in summary, everything we did that day we worked the commerce budget is on page 4. We took away and we added lots of things. And then the Appropriations Committee deleted more of those items that we had wanted to keep. Anybody have any questions for Charday about where the commerce budget is right now? Representative Curtis.
I was just trying to remember, and then in appropriations, did we add some additional? Seems like there was something So we add, not on here, right, is the K-State 150 or 105 program? And that was added, right, in appropriations?
Yes, that would be in the K-State budget, so not in the Department of Commerce Budget Committee report, but it is on the EDIF table on the fiscal year 2026 side.
Our ads that stayed were number 3, number 4, number 5 on our page. Appropriations kept all those. While they did delete the 1 million for the healthcare upskilling training program, it got moved to one of the social services budgets, KDAD's, I think. So the money's still in the budget, but it's just not in commerce anymore. And they, Approps agreed to keep Sunflower at what Commerce's final recommendation was. There's still $1 million, with the intention that they're probably going to shorten up the time and maybe look at a couple other things to make it last through this summer. Anything else? Okay, I think we have looked at EDIF. Is there anything else that we need to discuss as a committee? Dylan?
Madam Chair, Luke Drury is online and watching, and I just wanted to confirm Representative Carlin's statement that FY 2023 was the first time the full $2.2 million was transferred from EDIF to the State Water Plan Fund going back to 2014. So it's about a period of 10 years that transfer was not made.
Thank you for that information. Anything else? Representative Curtis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess we probably should look at how we make this correct. I mean, maybe not for this year, but it seems to me that we need to make sure that how we're using the fund is consistent with how, what the legislative intent is and how the statute reads. So there either needs to be changes made to the statute so that we're funding things correctly, or look at what we're funding out of EDIF and try to make some adjustments there so that we're in compliance with our statute. And I would really like, I mean, if it's still the same, that it needs to be divided before or between the 4 congressional districts, I'd really like to see some way that that's tracked to make sure that that is in compliance. And make sure that some of our money is not being, that there's a sense of fairness there and that we are indeed treating all of our congressional districts fairly.
Okay, we will make note of that to division of funds throughout the 4 congressional districts. And what was your first one? Sorry.
Tracking.
Is that being tracked? But then you also had something before that.
Just if we need to make changes either to the ordinance or to the statute so that then we are actually spending the dollars that the legislative intent is being followed. So if there needs to be changes to the statutes and how we use these funds, then we need to do that. Or we need to look at what we're funding in EDIF and make sure that that's in compliance, both in the things that we're funding and then the geographical distribution. I'm not sure where you take that request, honestly, Madam Chair, because it seems like it would need like legislation to, then make our statutes do what we want it to do today and what we're funding today, or I guess through appropriations that we're giving more scrutiny on how we're using that fund. Or if we go to the legislative post-audit recommendation and establish a committee or whatever it was, I forgot what they recommended exactly, but establish some oversight. Yeah. Because it's out of whack.
Yeah. Well, thank you for those comments, and we'll make some inquiries and see where we go. Representative White.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think everything on that list can be argued that it is economic development. That's quite the wide open term. And since we've had a different redrawing of districts, you're right, we might need to, now that both universities are in one district, we might need to look at that and rewrite our statutes. The colleges are a little different, but it's all economic development. I could argue everything on that list some way, somehow. It's quite the wide license in the original statute, in my opinion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it looks like Senator Lynn and Representative Jim Gardner requested this audit, and it was finished in October of 2019. So the audit's 5.5 years old. Who would this have been reported to the minute it was done? What committee would this been reported to upon completion?
Madam Chair, the Legislative Post-Audit Committee receives the reports.
And do we know after they received this, if they made any recommendations that we know of?
Unclear, but this would be a good opportunity.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hate to do all this work if it's already been done. Or, yeah, report.
Representative Carlin.
Thank you. And just in case somebody doesn't know, all of the audits are available to all representatives. So any of us can look at an audit and pursue some action on it. But you're right. I mean, who got the report? The audit committee. And I, and those who looked at it. And I looked at it, but I didn't see any reason to do anything at the time. Now we are seeing things and we're questioning, and so we still have the opportunity. I'm wondering, is this an option to maybe do a proviso in our budget at this time that we seek more information or have a committee or do whatever we decide? I think we could ask for a proviso to do something to move it forward. I guess, Luke, is that an option?
I apologize, Madam Chair. Could the representative repeat the question?
Well, because we're looking at this and maybe nobody else is, could this committee then make a proviso or ask for a proviso in the Appropriations Committee about further study or changes that we would recommend, and we would have to get together and make those recommendations, decide what we were going to ask for, but maybe that's a way to solve some of our questions.
Madam Chair, to answer the question, I believe the budgets have been reported out in appropriations already. The House Appropriations Committee is currently working the bill. So I don't know, or I don't believe that would come as a budget committee report at this point in time. Dylan, if you could maybe add a little bit of context there as well, perhaps.
Certainly. So there's a couple of options. It sounds to me like you're describing some kind of an interim committee to study the issue of how EDIF funds are spent. Luke is correct. At this point, all of your budget committee reports have gone out. However, we are working the budgets in appropriations. So if this point you wanted to add language to the appropriations bill to have an interim committee to study the expenditures from the Economic Development Initiatives Fund, that would be an option. We did create an interim committee via language in the appropriations bill today to study the issue of contract nursing. So there is precedent for that adjustment.
Thank you.
So are these the only agencies that get EDIF?
Madam Chair, that is correct for, as it stands in-house in the committee recommendation right now, if it stays in.
So if we were to go ahead with some kind of an interim, do we contact these agencies or do we just, Representative Roth?
Madam Chair, thank you. I think what you're trying to get to is an interim committee to look at the current statute and then review the way that it's currently being done today. So the statute goes back to whatever year. I'm not sure when the last revision to that statute was made, but for just a term, 2019, let's say 2019 is when we got this post-audit report based on a review, and we were looking at the statute, and it lists 3 different things in the statute, and then we've got the green sheet with all these other things. So one, I think you're wanting to look at, do we need to do something to the statute to bring it into line with what we're doing today? And then secondly, with what we're doing today, do you want to make any changes to how we're doing things today? That's my suggestion. Thank you.
Yes. But these affected agencies, that's my question. Do they need to be notified that we're going to do this, or is this something we just go ahead and do? I'm in uncharted territory, so. Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not suggesting at all that we change anything in the green sheet for this year at all. But going forward, do we need to transition into some other method of paying for these things? I mean, I definitely don't want to go through the problem of trying to take out and move this stuff at this time. So it would be some kind of, when the interim committee would meet, or if, I guess that's what we really need. That's the way we do it. They would make a recommendation that we could act on next year in this committee or in some committee. It could be, I think it should probably be this committee because we're originating it, but I don't know where it would go.
Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this may be for research, but is there a possibility, since this audit is 5.5 years old, that some of this has been addressed and rectified and it no longer has the same meaning as it did 5.5 years ago? And we're wasting our time looking into things that we need to wait and see what you come up with the audit committee made a report, and if actions were already taken, maybe? We're talking about a 5.5-year-old report and acting on it today. Somebody could have acted on and fixed some of this during the past. I mean, I don't know, but there's got to be a way to find out.
Madam Chair. To answer your question, typically it would be like a regular committee so that you can request agencies to come in and present and speak on whatever topic, so EDIF in this case, if you wanted those agencies to present on their specific funding that they receive through EDIF. Regarding the changes that have been made, I think that the interim committee would be able to go through that and identify those. And I think that as research, we can also try to provide some information on that. And there was one more thing that I was going to say. I don't remember, so never mind.
So another question, is this something we can work on in March so we don't have to spend taxpayer dollars to come back and have an interim committee? I'm
Madam Chair, yeah, obviously when the legislature is in session, this committee or other committees of the legislature can meet on this topic and make recommendations. Remembering that, the bill introduction deadline is passed for most non-exempt committees, but appropriations would still have the ability to introduce bills, but.
But I'm just talking about like finding out, like Representative Long said, find out what actions were taken and have that reported to this committee. Because maybe a lot of this stuff has been addressed. Representative Curtis.
Madam Chair, I think somebody is here from Post Audit. Could we maybe hear from them to see if perhaps they have any additional information to share?
Excellent idea.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Andy Brienzo. I am a principal auditor at LPA. I supervised this audit 5.5 years ago. In terms of what's been addressed, the one thing I can tell you with certainty that has been addressed is that the spending that we called into question most vigorously in this audit, as you can see on the bottom of page 8, was the general fund sweep. That was the one expenditure from this fund at the time of our audit that was clearly not related to economic development. Economic development is pretty broad. The rest of it we found was related to economic development in general. And then some of it, as you can see in figure 3 on page 7, $7.8 million or 18%, aligned with the more specific legislative intent that we think is revealed by the 3 accounts that all the money is supposed to be flowing through, but was not at the time. I can't speak to whether, A, the funds are being used, or excuse me, the accounts are being used now, and I also cannot speak to whether anyone is tracking the geographic distribution. Both of those are issues that we brought up in the audit.
Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just sorry, you went really fast. What was the thing that you said first that you felt wasn't right? I mean, wasn't authentic or?
Okay, so let's turn to page 8 of the audit.
Not that one.
Okay.
On page 7.
Page 7. Okay, so basically, stepping back, we bucketed during the audit all of the spending that came out of EDIF into 3 buckets. The first one is outlined in figure 3. This is the $7.8 million, 18%, this is on page 7, figure 3, that we thought aligned with the most specific version of legislative intent. So there's 3 accounts, and this is, you can see at the top right of this figure right here, there's 3 different accounts that are outlined in state law that all of this money was supposed to be going through and was not at the time. And these 3 accounts were intended for funding innovative companies, research and development, and infrastructure development. So because those 3 accounts existed and were supposed to be used, we read that as the most specific iteration version of legislative intent. And 18% of the funding that was being spent out of EDIF at the time of the audit met at least one of those 3. And you can see the check marks for the rest of figure 3 where we're identifying how each program that's getting funding aligns with that legislative intent. The second bucket, you can see this in the middle of page 8, about $14.4 million of EDIF funding in fiscal year 18. So this is 34%, was related to economic development writ large. So this is the very generic version of the legislative intent where it's related to economic development at least, but it's not related to one of the 3 accounts. And then at the bottom of page 8, you'll see the spending that was not related to economic development. This was the most egregious thing that we found, which was that 20.1 million or 48% just went to the general fund and was not going to economic development at all. And that, it sounds like, based on the information we have today, has been rectified. But the other thing is geographic distribution and then the use of the accounts. I can't speak to that because we haven't reviewed that since this audit was done.
Representative Long.
Okay, can you, on page 4, can you address the comment in the audit about the state does not track EDIF recipients' performance or evaluate whether EDIF is effective? after this report was made, do you know if they track them now?
I can't speak to whether they track them now. That's not something
sure.
that we've
Okay.
returned to. I can speak more generally about what we mean, if you're interested in that.
Sure.
Okay, so we do a lot of economic development incentive program evaluation in our office. And economic development incentive programs, as you can see here on figure 2, there are some best practices related to those to ensure that they are operating efficiently and effectively and doing the thing that the legislature would like them to be doing. So on the front end, you'll see here at the top of figure 2, we talk about designing and awarding the funding that's going out. So best practices state that economic development programs should have clear and measurable objectives. They should have policies and procedures that define how the program that's getting money will run, policies and procedures for making agreements with recipients of the funding, things like that. So it's on the front end. On the back end, the bottom of figure 2 there on page 4, you'll see that after the money goes out, best practices state that there should be some performance monitoring and management reporting. So whoever's managing the program should make sure recipients are meeting their expectations, submitting required information timely. They should be analyzing the program, reporting on its status, including checking whether recipients are following policies and procedures, deciding and reporting on whether the program is achieving its goals, things like that. So this is, in general, good practice for running an economic development program, which EDIF is. It sort of is operated differently than like STAR bonds, HPIP, those types of economic development programs. But because it's sort of treated, according to the agency staff we talked to at the time, it was sort of viewed and treated as like general fund spending, like they request some money and they get it, and no one's really checking up to see whether it's doing the thing that the legislature would like it to do. So in general, this is how economic development incentive programs should be overseen. And that's not happening with EDIF, or it was not happening with EDIF at the time of the audit. And again, I don't know what's happening now, but.
Representative Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So help me understand like how the funding flows and who might be that responsible group of doing that oversight. So the funds come out of the State Gaming Revenue Fund. And then there's some distributions, and then there's a distribution to EDIF. Is that?
So not exactly. So there's funding from the State Gaming Fund that goes to EDIF, and then it's just appropriated to different agencies for particular programs. So the agencies are requesting funding for particular programs to use EDIF funds for. They get the funding appropriated to them. They spend it, and then at the time of the audit, that was where it ended. Like no one was tracking where it was going or how it was being spent or whether these programs are meeting their goals. So in that sense, again, it's sort of like state general funds. That's how it was being done.
Representative White.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to go ahead and beat this dead horse a little bit more. My broad definition, and what is economic development? If we went around this room, we'd have a lot of different definitions. Going into the state general fund is, hey, a tax cut is economic development. So is educating a child at KU that goes out west or goes east and opens a business. That's economic development. I think the original intent of the statute was to leave it wide open. It's help the state of Kansas, whether it goes into this state general fund or what have you. It's such a broad term that if you think about it, everything on this list can be considered economic development. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Roth.
I'd like to just tag on to that you should appoint Representative White as a subcommittee to study the statute and definition of economic development for this committee and come back and report to us his findings with what he finds. Thank you.
Is there a second?
I'll give you my report right now. It's all good.
Okay, any other representative?
Well, I just have to add on to that, I'm sorry, but I'm okay, you know, I agree with you. You can pretty much argue anything can be part of economic development, but as stewards of our taxpayers' money, we want to make sure that those programs are effective, and we want to make sure that our statute is being followed. And the post-audit report reveals to us that those things are not happening. So I think that we just need to make sure that those things are corrected. Don't argue about things being economic development, but I just feel like we need to be good stewards and make sure that there are rules, and if there are other priorities that need to be set for this funding, because there's more demand than there is money, then we need to set those priorities.
Representative White.
Thank you for that comment. That's excellent. How do you argue this, the state water? What's the economic development of good water? It's hard to put a price tag and put a number on some of these things. It's an overall picture. It's macroeconomics versus microeconomics. And yes, cutting taxes grows economies, but that's an opinion. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Any final words of wisdom from anyone on the committee?
Well, yes,
Representative Carlin.
as wise as I can. This was a look back for how many years? Look back was, this was done 5.5 years ago. So anything that we did moving forward after all of us read this and decided we need to be careful. And so the next few years may look very different. This looks very different than some that I saw. But what was my question? This was 2018, and how far back did we look? I know 14's in here.
We just looked at fiscal year 18 for this audit. We reviewed the few fiscal years 14 to 17 before that to see whether they were generally
Well,
spent the
that's
same
what I meant. You had
way.
to look back to get that 14, that 2014 number. So I didn't know how far back you looked.
We looked in depth at fiscal year 2018.
So this is, then we got the report as legislators, and I did read it, and at the time, it woke us up that we needed to be more careful. A couple of years ago, it got way out of whack again. If we looked again right now, we'd find some issues in the immediate past. But this one is, we did really well this year, I think, on the proper use of the fund. And so if they looked at just this year, I doubt if we'd see too much. But the value of the audit is to remind us not to go astray in our funding, I think. Be happy to serve on a committee if you put one together.
Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at the bottom of page 11. It says we provided the draft audit report to the different departments, 5 or 6 or 7 of them there. Goes on to say that the agencies generally agreed with our findings and conclusions. And then attachment is providing additional information from some of the agencies about their agreement. So that gives me a little more insight about after the audit was made and how people reacted to it. Just wanted to bring that to the committee's attention.
Any other comments? Thank you, Andy, for being here today. Appreciate it. And thank you again, Sharday, for your presentation. Thanks, committee. Thanks, staff. Thanks, everybody sitting in the audience. We are adjourned. There will be further meetings this week for Ag Budget.